I had a house in Chicago like you did too, and if you take a look at what you sold it for, I'm sure it appreciated over time. But if you back out your real estate tax, a lot of us would say we lost money, and that's the real return on that asset. You're having to pay the government to rent the property off of them, even if you own it outright. And ultimately, when these people leave, like you and I did, there's less of a tax base to tax, so the taxes have to go up for everybody else. It stays, right? And you have this doom loop again of taxing and spending. And at some point in time, it's not going to work out. When I was a finance professor at DePaul University, I had the students in my class look at the books of the city of Chicago, look at the books of the state of Illinois, and they were flabbergasted, because at the end of the day, all they could really say, and these kids are bright, they're paying at that time 65 grand in 2015 to go to DePaul to get a finance degree. I'm sure it's 90 now. They all came to the realization that this is a game of rearrange the deck chairs in the Titanic.
Farmers are frustrated. Green policy is cutting food production worldwide. It's an absolute disgrace. We're getting blamed on carbon issues in Ireland. We're being blamed as the biggest contributor of carbon, 37%. The emission figures for agriculture are only half the carbon cycle. And if you go back to when you went to school, you learned about photosynthesis, you learned about carbon is sequestered on farms. We sequester more than we emit, and we're getting blamed 100%. We're being forced to cut the cow herd. We have a derogation coming in addition to cut nitrogen use. We're being forced to cut dairy production and beef production in Ireland, while Dublin Airport is going to get a new licence for 42 million passengers instead of 32 million passengers a year. So they're allowed to increase their carbon, and no other sector of society has been asked to cut production of product. You go to any pharmaceutical company, Athlone here is full of pharmaceutical companies. None of those companies are being asked to cut product production. Nobody, except farmers. And we're actually the ones that are carbon neutral, and we're the ones, because we're the low-hanging fruit, we're the soft touch. But I tell you, we're not the soft touch anymore.
Welcome to another episode of Counterculture, the show that stands at the intersection of reason and faith in the battle against sentimentality. It looks up to farmers and ranchers, soft touches no more, to save the West from the eco-supremacists who want to save the planet from the people. The COVIDian lockdown supply chains designed to get food to market were not enough. Now the Chicken Littles are mandating farmers register their cows with the government. It sounds like a bad Chick-fil-A revenge plot, but in reality, it's just awful public policy. When farmers from Dublin to Brussels to Amsterdam are taking time away from their crops and livestock to block traffic and fertilize the streets downtown, it might be time to pay attention to what they're saying. I mean, at least if you're a fan of food, which I am. We could really use a cow guy in America, too. Thankfully, we here at Counterculture have just such a gentleman in Scott the Cow Guy Shellady. Scott the Cow Guy grew up working on his family's dairy farm in Northwest Illinois. He spent the last 3 decades trading commodities and equities at firms in North America, Europe, and Asia. As such, he applies Midwestern common sense to his analysis of market trends, fiscal and monetary policy, and emerging asset classes like cryptocurrencies. You probably know Scott the Cow Guy from his frequent appearances on Fox Business, or more recently, his shows on RFD TV, where he is the market specialist for Market Day Report and the host of the Cow Guy Close. Scott the Cow Guy Shellady, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
I'm great. I'm glad to be here. Always would do it.
So we have this situation. So I would just want to layer in one thing with respect to farmers and ranchers revolting in the West, and then I'll let you have at it because you're sort of uniquely positioned to address this and its implications. But in addition to truly, and you can explain this, legislation that requires farmers and ranchers to register their cows with the government, we have Bill Gates, who a few months ago came out with a proposal that he wanted to buy millions of acres of trees in the Pacific Northwest, cut them all down, and bury the trees in shallow graves to reduce carbon emissions. Now he is talking most recently at a symposium hosted by Bloomberg News about cows and the need to develop a new operating system for cows, as it were. They cause 6% of carbon emissions through methane gas because of their digestive systems, he explained. And we need to do something about cows. So cows and trees in shallow graves in the Pacific Northwest to save the planet. What say you?
Well, before I got really into this, I would have said that a lot of this was tinfoil hat stuff, crazy. But you know, if you really want to find out, go to Bezos or Gates' websites or even the World Economic Forum, and they put it in black and white. It's not crazy talk. Now, I've had a few people on my show that seem to be crazy, but when I do the homework, they're only parroting what these people put out there. You could have seen during Black Lives Matter and in the 2020 protests that they wanted to get rid of the nuclear family because they put it on their website, okay? When you go to the World Economic Forum, they want to reduce people from 8 billion on the planet to 500 million. And I guarantee you that Bill Gates and Bezos think that they're probably one of those 500 million. But to your point, I used to think it was a climate thing, all right? And it started off that way with ESG. And I toured the Midwest. I'm talking 110, 150,000 head cow operations. Really big business when it comes to ranchers. And let them know that, you know, we have people in our government, just like they do in Europe, that are really into this ESG, environment, social, and governance thing. And they're coming for you. They're absolutely coming for you because they don't think that what you do to these animals, as far as what it does to the climate, is bad. They've actually moved on from ESG, trying to save the planet, what Bill Gates is talking about. They're now moving down this road that it's just immoral to kill an animal and eat it. That's where they're going to. Now, it's going to be as crazy as taking down statues of people that own the dogs, because they've already said having pets is immoral. That's where. So I've seen it in my 3 short years of doing my show. I have seen it move from ESG to climate change to help the climate to now it's just immoral to do what these people are doing. Now, let's just put one big umbrella over the whole thing. In order to control the world, you have to control 2 things, fuel and food. And you look at everything that they do, it either comes down to the fact that they want to control the food or they want to control the fuel. Those 2 things is all that matters to them.
So wait, just one point of order. Did you say that the WEF's position, I know they're zero population growth types, you know, despite the fact that Paul Ehrlich's population bomb was a dud and that we've known for 50 years that the Malthusian arguments, neo-Malthusian arguments that were made in the 60s and 70s, none of them materialized. But did you say they want to take the global population from 8 billion to 500 million or down 500 million? They want to reduce the population by more than 90%?
Yes. So that's where you've seen, maybe I've seen them out in Nashville, but there is a bumper sticker out there that says the carbon they want to get rid of is you. That's it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate their candor. I mean, to a certain extent, right. I appreciate it.
Right.
So now we know where everybody stands. Right. I mean, it is, and but the farmers that are protesting in these Western European countries that I mentioned, it hasn't really come to America yet, but I suspect if they get too far down the road that Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab want to take us, that may. What are they specifically protesting? What are we to understand about what's happening there, and maybe what's also happening here, but it's not as pronounced, it's not as public, it's not generating the revolt yet?
Well, they want to get rid of the methane, so they're trying to buy back cattle farms, ranches and dairy herds. They're trying to do that in Ireland. And thank God that we still have some common sense when it comes to these people. And by the way, in the rural communities, our farmers and ranchers, they're the last bastion of common sense on this earth, right? Remember, they didn't get to crawl under their desk over COVID, suck their thumb waiting for a vaccine. They had to go milk the cows and put the crop in the ground. They didn't have a chance to work from home. They're always home and they're always working. But I'll say that the two biggest things are the fossil fuels, and the way they want to stop those really impedes upon, say, some of their fertilizers. And when they try to do that in Ghana and Sri Lanka, their productivity went down by 30% and their population starved. And they kicked out the 2 prime ministers who were trying to have a very high ESG score. They did. They got to 97 and 98 in both Sri Lanka and Ghana, but they lost their jobs over it and they were exiled out to small islands in the middle of nowhere. And so I think ours is like in the 50s when it comes to the US, and I wish it was in the 30s, because this is a bunch of garbage. They are going to try to come after, and the governments are doing it by fossil fuels and what that does to fertilizers, and when it comes to animals and what it does to the methane. They're coming after everything that the farmer stands for because they're at the crossroads of food and fuel. And so there are a lot of farmers in Europe that are saying, I've had enough, I can't stand it anymore. And I will also say this, another facet of this is that central bank digital currencies, the CBDCs, you know, when people say that it can't happen here, it's already happened. It's happened in Canada with what they did with the truckers. There is this overarching effort to try to control everything. But the first two things at the top of that list are food and fuel. And so we've seen the farmers in Western European countries, and they're all doing it, are standing up against it because they're hurting their production. They're trying to buy back their farms. And even to the case that you mentioned in the opening of the show, they're trying to register all of our cattle here under the guise of everybody wants to know where their food comes from. Well, if you want to regulate something, you need to know how many you have, who has it, and where they are. Kind of sounds like guns too, right? And so they're doing that with cattle, and the farmers in this country know that that's what they're trying to do, and they've really started to push back. But the farmers in this country and the ranchers haven't pushed back enough, but they will, because we're getting to this point where it's going to start hurting their livelihoods, and it's for no good reason. We're throwing our own people under the bus. Ask the folks on the Keystone Pipeline, ask any coal miner in West Virginia. Those jobs are now overseas. It's absolutely amazing about how much we've let have happen so far. And I really think it's going to come down to the farmers and ranchers to finally be the people to put a flag in the ground and say, no more.
Maybe the truckers too, since so many of them are transporting the fuel and the food as well, right? Right, and they've been front lines too, as you mentioned, in Canada being a good example. So now the other piece of this that is more immediate and probably more top of mind for more Americans is commodity prices increasing, and thus the cost of the bills they're paying at the grocery store increasing. So now I was having this conversation with Jim Perry, who's another market analyst, and and he's suggested that now the first rate cut that has been built into sort of market expectations is 6 months out because of how persistent inflation is and is anticipated to be. What can we expect in the short term? What can people expect in the short term who've seen their purchasing power, sort of the median American who's seen his or her purchasing power decline by, roughly 20 to 25% over the last 3 years?
Well, probably even more than that, because since 2020, we've seen food prices up 34% and fuel prices up 33%, the two things that we touch every day. And then the government will fight back and say, whoa, 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 housing is down. Housing's down a lot. So are used cars. Well, I only buy a house once every 5 years and a car once every 5 years. But the things we touch every day are killing us. So the inflation story is not going away. We have a big number tomorrow, CPI number tomorrow. Right now it's at 3.2% from a high of 9.1. There was a really good article written the other day, I can't remember where, about how somebody realized that, Americans and America is not an inflation idiot. You can't keep telling them that inflation's getting better. You can't keep telling them that prices are coming down because inflation's coming down. Everybody's starting to wake up to the fact that if the CPI, the consumer price index, was 9.1%, that means prices grew 9.1% from that point last year. Well, if the following year they're up 3.2%, which they are, that means they're up 3.2% on top of 9.1%. They're just going up at a slower rate. Now, Dan, the easiest way that I can explain this to everybody is if I gained 10 pounds a month last year every month, but this year I'm only gaining 5 pounds a month, am I getting thinner? No.
It brings it home.
Yeah, right. Every market pundit out there is trying. Everybody on the television, on those Sunday news shows, is trying to tell you that you're getting thinner because you're not gaining as much weight as you did last year, but you're still gaining. Our prices are still rising, and they're compounding, just like your interest does at the bank. So that's how we get to these crazy numbers like 34 and 33%. And we have a pivotal number tomorrow. We get another read on the CPI. The last one was 3.2. If it doesn't come in where we can say that things are getting easier or prices are rising at a slower pace, so under 3.2, the government's going to have a very, very hard time of cutting interest rates. And now they're to a point where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, because we have a general rule of thumb that 15% of America owns 85% of the stocks. It's around there. I'm not exact. But if you're in that 15%, I don't care if you're Kenneth Langone and you're 92 years old, you have never seen a better market in your entire life, because all the real estate you own, and I'm sure you own a lot, and all the stocks you own, and I'm sure you own a lot, have never appreciated like they have done over the last 5 or 7 years. Now, if you are in the 85%, where you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't own your home, and your job probably doesn't give you a 401k. If it does, it's probably very, very small. And again, there's no real estate holdings in your family. You've never seen a market that's hurt you more. And I don't care how old you are. So those are the two dichotomies that the Fed is going to have to try to satisfy. So if they don't cut rates, they're going to kill the lower class, right? But if they do cut rates, I think that they still kill the lower class because it's just going to reignite this inflation problem all over again. And they haven't been able to kick it yet. So lately, the numbers are pointing like inflation's coming back. Look at crude oil, that's up. Look at some of the other commodities. Look at cocoa, that'll take the hair off your face. But I'll tell you, they have not kicked inflation enough to make it so that they can cut rates. If you look at the things that they look at, there's no way they can cut rates. But it just seems like the world is run by 35-year-old finance people that have only gotten out of school with 0% interest rates, and they think 5.5 is expensive. Let me tell you, you go back 50 years and take a look at the Fed funds rate. Right now, we're at 5.25 to 5.5. They talk in terms of a range. We're at 5.42 if you take a 50-year average. And that's with 15 years of zero. So where we're at right now is more fair than if we had them at zero. And the reason that we're in this problem in the first place is because the Fed kept them artificially low for way too long, like they kept inflation way too hot for way too long. I mean, this is all going to come home to roost, and there's no way out without some pain, bottom line.
Yeah, but I mean, their perspective, and you can sort of read the tea leaves when Jay Powell speaks, is that it's just a marketing problem. And so we have to convince people, talk about the low unemployment number. The underlying economy is very strong. You heard the former host of the Captain Kangaroo TV show, who's now the Treasury Secretary, the other day on CNBC saying, that maybe some of the savings that people had during COVID is being drawn down a bit, but otherwise the strong households are in a strong financial position. You hear other spin like, yes, maybe 3/4 of Americans feel less economically secure than they did when Biden took office. But if you really look below the fold, what they're saying is they're secure, but they feel like the overall economy is not secure. And so it's a lot of sort of message shifting going on, because I just go back to something, George Carlin famously said many generations ago, which is just remember, DC, it's a big club and you're not in it. So the 15% versus the 85%, the 15% need to be served, not only because they're in the club, but also to keep up appearances so you don't spark a real panic that would be led by the 15% who have access to all the comm channels. And then you get a multiplier effect once you go down the socioeconomic ladder. So they have to do whatever manipulations are required by the mystics at the Fed to keep those market returns you're talking about at least through November, it would seem to me. And so that means more distortions. That means probably a harder fall when the fall comes, but certainly it's not coming before November, according to them. I mean, in terms of what they're really thinking.
Yeah, that's my worst fear, is that you get a regime change and all those plates that have been spinning on all those tiny little sticks come falling down in the first quarter of next year. Because what we're doing right now is unsustainable. Maybe you've heard this, maybe you haven't, but you know that every 100 days, we create another $1 trillion in debt. We have a consumer that is spending, they call it doom spending, like there's no tomorrow, we don't care anymore. And they're only mimicking our Congress. And I don't care if it's Republicans or Democrats, and that's what I like about Robert F. Kennedy when he calls it the uniparty, because it really is. Nobody really there grasps this problem that the convexity of that bankruptcy curve. We're in it now, okay? When we're printing money to pay off interest, we're not printing money to pay off debt, just interest, and that's the doom loop we're in. And Congress is continuing to spend and forgive student loans, and we've got the consumer continuing to spend on credit cards. Again, you know that they've been maxed and they're the all-time record highs, even with interest rates going up to 5.25, 5.5, so your credit card debt's in the mid-20s. That's the situation that we're in. And which you quote Carlin, I'll quote Hemingway. How did you go bankrupt? Well, gradually at first, and then all of a sudden, all at once. And that's what we're facing right here. And we don't have finance people in Congress that can grasp the fact that once this really starts going, it's that big ball and Raiders lost ark that you can't stop, and it just gains speed.
Yeah, but they have. But here's the thing. So what are we at? We're at 100. Debt is 120% of GDP. That's basically where we're at?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the flip side is, and you're hearing this from all of the functionaries in the administration, is, all the targeting the industrial policy, the targeted investments to transform the economy, and so on and so forth. So they're still printing and spending the money. They're not drop shipping it around the country like they were with the COVID relief checks, but it's still the same program, because this is the only way they keep those plates spinning that you're talking about. So, and here's so the rub is, people like you say, spending beyond your means is not a good place to be. That seems pretty intuitive, pretty straightforward, but people don't see the consequences, or they don't realize the indirect consequences, like the rates they're paying on loans and credit card balances and so forth. But they don't make those connections. And so until there is something that is cataclysmic, a la 2008, it just doesn't seem to me that there's much pushback to continuing to print and spend.
Well, you're right, because the consumer thinks that they're going to be let off of the debt, like Biden's been doing a lot lately with the student loans. And Congress is just trying to get reelected. And so we can't, okay, it's unsustainable, but I don't know when that actually happens. I don't know when we actually finally do hit the wall. But like I said, it's Hemingway. It'll be gradually at first and then all of a sudden all at once. And what we don't have is people in Congress willing to say, I don't care if I get reelected again, we just can't keep doing this, because they all want to get reelected again. I'm telling you, I deal with guys that have big accounting firms, right? I got a guy on my show, he's got 55 accountants. And he tells me that he's doing these accounts, and people are firing people. They're not hiring people. I just did a story on my show yesterday, Dan, where all of the job gains are going to illegal or legal immigrants. They're not going to the U.S.-based worker. Those people in jobs over the last 4 years has gone down by 78,000, where illegal or legal immigrants has gone up by 3.4 million in the last 4 years. So okay. You're talking about the average Americans not paying attention, or maybe they just don't know about what's been really happening with the debt and what it's doing to their dollar, their spending power, and their credit card bills. They're also not actually seeing the structural change that's being foisted upon them by not having a southern border, by not having people look after criminals, getting rid of criminals. There's structural change that is shaking the very foundation of America, whether it be from your pocketbook or what you're standing on. And a lot of times people are just trying to work and get by, and they don't actually see it.
So what do you think the picture is? Channel the median American family that maybe has a household income of 80 to 120 grand, that range, right? Median American family, probably two incomes too, to make that number. Where are they at right now? Where are they at right now, and what do you think their prospects are, for the next 5 years? 5 years from now, 5-year horizon. What does it look like for them?
I mean, if they've got if they've had the ability to save, which polls suggest they haven't, they'll be in a better spot, because that money will be powerful. But a lot of them are going to be in credit card debt. A lot of them are going to be in debt, just like the country is. To your point about 123% debt to GDP. This is how our leaders look at those numbers, and maybe this is how some of our households look at these numbers. There's been 52 countries that have made it to 130% debt to GDP, and of the 52 countries, 51 of them went bankrupt. The only one that didn't is Japan. And when you hear our legislators talk about our debt to GDP ratio, they all turn to Japan as the example that we can continue down this path, because theirs is way worse. It's over 200% debt to GDP. They don't talk about the other 51 that went bankrupt. And I think a lot of American homeowners in the range that you just spoke about, I mean, they have not, I don't care what anybody says, their wages have not kept up with their grocery bill and their gas bill. No way. So they're getting eaten alive, and I'm sure they've dipped into savings. I'm sure they've dipped into 401k hardship loans. I mean, it's not about how they get through, it's whether or not they last. We talk about this all the time in trading. It's not a time to make a return on your capital. It's just a time to get a return of your capital. And I think that's where the U.S. homeowner is. We have to make sure that we don't have these people. I mean, it's not going to be pretty when we have to normalize, and we're trying to normalize, but we have to get the Fed out of our back pocket. These artificial interest rates, what they've been doing to money over the last 15 years is criminal. And what that's done to house prices, and it's unaffordable to buy a home. It's not going to be affordable. And think about what happens if they do cut rates, Dan, like they all say. Do you think houses are going to get cheaper if money gets cheaper? No way. They're just going to go up even more. I mean, they can't cut them and they can't raise them. They're in trouble. And the average American household, like you said, 80 to 120 grand, they're in trouble too because there's no relief. Where are you going to get the relief? Unless you actually see deflation. And the way to get to deflation is we've got a 3.7 or 8% unemployment rate. You need to see that up over 5. And if you put numbers to that means we're going to have to put another 5 million people out of work to see some sort of deflationary price pressure so things actually do, quote unquote, come down in price. Because right now with a 2%, even a 2% inflation rate means they're still going up at 2% a year. So there are some very, very uncomfortable things that we're going to have to go through to get on the right side of this.
Well, and as we both know, hailing originally from Illinois, one of the other things that's happening simultaneously, those increased real asset values, increased property taxes, especially in states that don't have caps, which is all the blue states, and you're already getting your equity eaten away at you in high property tax states like Illinois, which is number one with the bullet national champ, and New Jersey and New York, Connecticut. And so now if you have a reversal of fortune and the government is still expecting X out of, your hide for what they say your home is worth, now you're getting upside down on your home in addition to upside down on your other personal finances.
I had a house in Chicago like you did too. And if you take a look at what you sold it for, I'm sure it appreciated over time. But if you back out your real estate tax, a lot of us would say we lost money. And that's the real return on that asset. You're having to pay the government to rent the property off of them, even if you own it outright. And ultimately, when these people leave, like you and I did, there's less of a tax base to tax. So the taxes have to go up for everybody else. It stays, right? And you have this doom loop again of taxing and spending. And at some point in time, it's not going to work out. When I was a finance professor at DePaul University, I had the students in my class look at the books of the city of Chicago, look at the books of the state of Illinois. And they were flabbergasted because at the end of the day, all they could really say, and these kids are bright, they're paying at that time 65 grand in 2015 to go to DePaul to get a finance degree. I'm sure it's 90 now. They all came to the realization that this is a game of rearrange the deck chairs in the Titanic. That's all it was.
Well, right. And what have we seen during Biden's presidency? 3.2 million people, according to census tracts, have moved from blue counties that voted for Biden to red counties. So, I mean, it's not just at the state level, it's at the specific county level in specific states too. I mean, there's no bigger indictment than people moving with their feet because that's not an easy thing to do for most people, particularly those with families. I wanted to get your take on something else, and going back to the investor class, the 15%. So the discussion of hedging this environment that you're describing. And a lot of people are saying gold, and you're seeing gold, the price per ounce go up recently. And then, of course, your good buddy Larry Fink from BlackRock and everybody else is now cheerleading Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies now that he's got the hottest Bitcoin exchange in the world, hottest ETF in the world. Larry Fink's on board with Bitcoin. Jamie Dimon's on board. Everybody's on board with crypto.
I don't know if you remember a bunch of smart guys in the room called long-term capital management in the late 90s. But everybody wanted to throw money at those folks because they were the smartest guys. And guess what? It didn't work out. I don't care if Larry Fink thinks he's smart or Jamie Dimon's behind it. I'm not a fan. And to tell you what, if we really do get Armageddon, like everybody that's buying gold is thinking, or maybe even Bitcoin because they're worried about the dollar being devalued so much. I mean, if there's Armageddon, where are you going to get your Bitcoin exchange ATM? But you know what? If you got a pocket full of gold, you might be in business. So I understand that rush to gold. There's a lot of nervousness out there. I think Bitcoin took a lot away from gold over the last 5 years. A lot of kids that were new to the game and could trade on their phones were expressing their point of view about the U.S. economy in Bitcoin instead of gold, because gold lay there for a long time. I'm not saying it's going to go through the moon, but there are some folks that are saying that too. I This whole Bitcoin thing. Look, if there's 10 people that walk outside your front window, ask 10 of them if they've heard of it. Yes. How many of the 10 have invested in it? I'm going to say one. And then if you ask the guy that invested in it, explain it to me, he can't. And so, from my point of view, Dan, I like Warren Buffett's point of view. You need to have an investing strategy. And if your strategy is only, I think the guy behind me in line is going to pay more for it than I am today. That's not a strategy. And ultimately, there's the end of the line. And so, I don't care how long this takes. I think it's still a fad. And we've seen, look, I'm Dutch. Reminds me of the tulips.
And so even if you hedge with gold, more traditional inflation hedge, right? Is that enough of insulation with respect to inflation and the devaluation of the dollar, given all of the anxiety over the dollar's status as the reserve currency of the world? Is that going to be enough? I mean, I guess your perspective on the reserve currency is the ultimate question. I mean, is that a real and imminent threat, the displacement of the dollar as the world's reserve currency? It doesn't seem so, but perception becomes reality, and that story is being peddled in a lot of places.
It just makes things more expensive if you're not the reserve currency. It doesn't automatically mean it's a death sentence, right? So if I lived in England for 16 years. They were the last reserve currency before the dollar took over, right? They still have lives, they still get along, but it just adds a separate tax to everything in the country because they're always having to either buy or sell goods and services a lot of times in dollars, right? And as that dollar fluctuates, it just makes it more expensive for them. You can get by, but it's not ideal. We've had 5 reserve currencies in the history of the planet. They all last around 100 to 110 years. I think we're between 105 and 107 years, depending on who you ask. So we're at the end of our life cycle. The people that want to take it over, and they've stated it, it's out there, they've said it, it's China. And they're doing all they can to make that happen. It won't kill America. It just makes things more expensive. It's not ideal at all. That's going to be a problem. So your other question is gold a big enough hedge? The answer is no. However, if you're in that investing class, you're going to lose money, but you're going to get a discount on everything else you want to buy anyway in the future. So as your riches go down, everything else around you gets even cheaper because everybody else has it worse than you, and you might actually make out.
Just looking at good examples, we're always trying to identify good examples that should be replicated or scaled, including in the public policy arena, including at the level of the sovereign. So I mean, in the 50 laboratories of democracy, we compare Florida or Texas to Illinois and California. What about Argentina? I know this is still early in his administration, but Milei has come in like a house on fire. I mean, his actions are matching his rhetoric, which you don't get to say about a lot of politicians. Fire 25,000 federal government employees. He's moving in the direction of dollarization. He's eliminating agencies wholesale. I mean, he is really trying to get Argentina up off its back. And I just wonder if a mid-sized country that once enjoyed status as a global power, if he is able to bring Argentina back through the various market-oriented reforms he's pursuing and shrinking the size of the state, growing the size of the individual Argentinian, does that provide maybe the path for a reset in the West that people always want to replicate success, right?
I think it provides hope. But I also think that, if you talk to a sociologist, they'll say the best time to be alive on this planet is right now. Best education, arguably, we could take, that's another show. But, best healthcare. You don't have Vikings kicking the door into your family and killing everybody. It's the best time to be alive is right now. All of your basic needs are taken care of. And because of that, I think the American public generally has gotten very, very complacent. And we have to make up crises or make up things to be against to give ourselves worth. And I think that if we had somebody like the Argentinian Milei, I don't know how to say it exactly, but there would be such an uproar in this country because everybody feels the need to have their point of view heard. I mean, if they had to spend time going out and foraging for things for their family to eat, they wouldn't have enough time to wake up one morning and think, maybe I'm a girl, right? They invent their own problems because they're so comfortable. Right? They invent their own problems because they're so comfortable. And I think there'd be such a backlash because look what's happened to Trump. For the derangement syndrome with him is just, to me, I just want to sit down with these people and go, just walk me through why you hate him. But they have to feel a part of the society or in a club because every one of their basic needs has been taken care of. They sit in Starbucks all day and type away. There isn't anything threatening their daily existence. So they have to make up some sort of thing to get behind. And I think that would make it very difficult to have somebody like him here. I mean, we kind of do with Trump already, but just look how much visceral hate comes from people that don't even know him, never even know what he stands for.
Right. I mean, it's the problem of dependency, and it's the left's that's the left's paradigm is dependency. They know with dependency, with dependency, you've got a loyal constituency, and so this becomes the rub. And so maybe, I mean, you're not rooting against America when you're describing the potential consequences of terrible public policy over an extended period of time, but perhaps the only thing that creates the kind of revolt we're seeing to varying degrees in the West, some other Western countries, is the kind of hurt that people are feeling in some of those other Western countries, such that your basic needs that you're talking about are a lot more precarious than they are currently. That seems to me what you're suggesting, in terms of scenario, not in terms of advocacy.
Right. Nobody would love to see that happen, but that would be the world's biggest wake up call if your chicken salad sandwich at Starbucks is $29 instead of $13. I think that make people sit up and take notice, but right now they're not.
Scott the Cow Guy Shellady, you can catch his reviews on RFD TV, Market Day Report, as well as Cow Guy Close. Scott the Cow Guy, thank you for joining us on Counterculture. Appreciate your time and insights as always. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And please leave a comment in the comment section. We'd love to hear your thoughts.